Mark, thank you for waiting. Why aren't you Catholic?
I think I'm not Catholic because of where I found Christ, which would be in the South.
Oh,
and it just seems like the
like in the Bible
Catholic
Belt.
Church is not as. I'm probably in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt here.
Okay, okay.
But so we've got there's some small Catholic churches, and as I told the screener, as a as a boy, my parents, grandparents, they were all Catholic. We were up near Chicago, so I almost feel like I'm not now, because now being married to a Baptist, there's going to be no way to ever go back to. There's words that the last caller used, this catechist thing.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm really calling, is because my sister, who's still in the Catholic Church, sent me a book on a year with the catechism, and it always talks about the catechist. And so when that last caller was talking about catechist, what does that mean?
Oh, great.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
But that's not my question.
No,
mine's about 10 Commandments, but anyway.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We're glad you called.
Catechist is a teacher. So, but go ahead.
All right.
It's a teacher of the faith. But we should give a little more explanation. Okay. I mean, the basic evangelization.
I want to make sure I get to his actual topic, but yeah.
You got time. Evangelizing is the act of inviting people or introducing people to the person of Jesus and inviting them to make a response to the person of Jesus. Catechesis is the process, and the catechist is one who involves himself or herself in the process of fully educating someone in Jesus, in the Bible, and in the teaching of the church. So it's the teacher of the faith.
So the evangelist kind of does the introduction and gets them in the door, and then the catechist does the
theoretically,
yes, right, yeah. The evangelist, the evangelium is the good news. So you are proclaiming the good news, and you introduce people, you tell people about Jesus. And then some people are going to say yes to that. Some people are going to be interested. And then maybe you enter into a process of catechesis with them. Maybe you give them to someone else who can kind of guide them through that. But they give them more of the formation and the education of what is Christianity all about? What is the Catholic Church all about?
All right. Now we can get to your question, Mark.
Question mark.
So I'm a little bit behind. I'm on day 294 in this book, this year with the catechism, and it's going through the 10 Commandments, and it seems like it jumped over number 2, what I would call thou shalt not make.
I feel like we're clipping you out when we make any noise. I apologize for that, Mark. I think there's a technical problem here, and it's making it sound like you're dropping out on us. So what I'm getting from you is there's Protestant 10 Commandments and there's Catholic 10 Commandments. You want to know why the Catholics changed them?
Well, yeah, I want to know why they don't align so that all of us in the church, because you were talking about the Catholic Church. To me, I'm part of the Catholic Church in the sense of the universal church, or the body of Christ, even though I'm sitting in a Baptist congregation. That's how I feel, at least, because I defend the Catholic. When people talk about Catholics, I'm like, well, aren't we all Catholics in the sense of that? But so it bothers me that the 10 Commandments then become an issue of argument. Well, how come the Catholics have their 10 Commandments and we've got our 10 Commandments?
That's a great question. So there are two issues that give rise to this. The first is that the 10 Commandments are given twice, in Exodus 20 and then Deuteronomy 5. And they're not given in exactly, like the content is not given in exactly the same order, which is strange. The second issue is that they're not numbered in the Bible. Actually, we'll add a third issue. They're called in the Bible the Decalogue, which means the 10 words. Now, that could mean 10 commandments, but it doesn't have to mean commandments. But either way you look at it, there's certainly more than 10 words given. There's certainly more than 10 commandments given. And so trying to figure out where to number them is a little tricky. And different people have numbered them differently throughout the ages. So the numbering you're used to, like what you'd get in a Baptist church, you'll find the same numbering in an Eastern Catholic Church. On the other hand, Western Catholics number them more along the lines of Deuteronomy than along Exodus, and you'll find that numbering as well in a Lutheran church. So Protestants don't agree, and Catholics use different numbering among Catholics. It's confusing. And then to make it more confusing, the Jewish numbering begins with Exodus 20, verse 2. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. They would say that's the first word of the 10 words, or that's part of the first word of the 10 words. So we have the same content, but we number it differently because of the fact that it's not numbered within the Bible, and everyone has to figure out where to put the bullet points through the numbers as they're making sense of it.
Let's come back and we'll get a response from you, and we won't talk over you, Mark, because of this technical problem. Right back with more Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live. We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Throughout history, some Catholics have been among the worst kind of villains, right? Or were they? In Cancelled, historian Steve Weidenkopf digs into the lives and controversies of some of these Catholics whose reputations have been blackened, often unfairly. He takes on the anti-Catholic versions of history and defends not only these figures, but the faith they represent. Order your copy of Cancelled today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
What is the Catholic Church? Everybody seems to have an opinion, but the church never quite fits into the boxes people try to make for it. In The Faith Unboxed, author Andrew Petiprin looks at some of the most common boxes people put the Catholic Church in and explains why they don't fit. In doing so, he brings us closer to what the church really is, the institution founded by Christ. Order The Faith Unboxed today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Joe Heschmeyer, our guest, Catholic Answers Live. Why aren't you Catholic is our topic. So we're very grateful to those who call and share with us why they're not Catholic. We do try to be friendly and neighborly in the way that we speak to you. So I hope you'll feel welcome here. But you don't have to be too friendly. Don't tread too lightly. If you really disagree with Catholics, we like those conversations as well. And I really want you to be very intelligent in the way you make your points and make it very difficult to respond, because Joe's the one that has to respond to you. So go ahead and call.
I was just going to say, it sounds like you're asking for people to be meaner to me, but I actually agree with you. So please.
Well, I don't want you have to be too delicate with us. We're all right. You can call and tell us what you don't like about the Catholic Church if you want. 888-318-7884. Mark is in Trenton, Georgia. He himself is a Baptist, but well, I was trying to. You'll see. He's reading the catechism. Instead of finishing the sentence, I just made one. He's reading his way through the teachings of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. His question is about the Ten Commandments. Did you feel? I'll go back to Mark if you feel that you completed your answer.
I mean, there's more that could be said. Because the basic issue, just to recap, is that more than 10 things are said in the Ten Commandments. There's no numbering. And the order of the things said between Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5 varies slightly. And so throughout the ages, different groups of Christians and different individual theologians have, when they're filling in which number goes where, they've numbered them slightly differently. But this is only an issue of how we number them. The same content is true on all sides. We agree on Exodus 20 says all of these things. We agree Deuteronomy 5 says all of these things. The only question is which number is which. And so it's not a substantive disagreement.
All right, Mark, we had that little technical difficulty, but I would like to come back to you and see if this answer is satisfactory and if you have any follow-up.
Well, since you allowed us to be mean, while I was on hold, I went to Deuteronomy 5, and I happened to I've got a New King James here, and I just so happened in Deuteronomy 5 had circled the bullet points as you talk about, and these seem to line up exactly with Exodus. But what I noticed on the Catholic version, they divide what I would call the 10th commandment of the covet part into two different covet clauses, and they ignored this one about you shall not make for yourself any carved image, and that's the difference in the wording that Joe was talking about. But that's still number 2.
So we would have that as part of number
so
1.
I don't know.
It's not, the words aren't missing; they're just in number 1.
Okay. You shall have no other gods before me. And then you shall not. So you're saying what that means is you shall not make a carved image and bow down to it, and that's all part of it. That's all meaning no other gods.
Right. So what
So then
Exodus
after
and Deuteronomy.
the covet part.
Yeah. So okay, on the covet part, the numbering in Deuteronomy 5 is clearer on this in verse 21. That neither shall you covet your neighbor's wife. This is the sin of lust. And that's the 9th commandment. And then after that, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his manservant, or maidservant, his ox, or his ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. That's greed. That's a different kind of covetousness. So they're two different sins, because a sexual covetousness and a material covetousness are just not the same thing. Now, you can group those two things together as just a prohibition against coveting, and that's one way of numbering them. I'm not saying it's bad to do that. It's fine to do that. You can also number those as two different sins, where one is about the sin of lust and one is about the sin of covetous greed.
Very good. Well, I'll take that, because that makes sense to me, as far as how to break that one up.
Well, Mark.
And then, if I may, the other two things to point out there, when it says don't make the pekal or pesal, P-E-C-E-L is the Hebrew transliteration there. It literally is engraved image or graven image or something like that. But in context, it always means an idol. So it's not literally wrong to engrave a quarter, for example. And God even commands in Exodus the engraving of cherubim to put on the Ark of the Covenant. So it's not a literal prohibition against engraving things. It is a prohibition against idolatry. So one of the other reasons we number them as we do in the West is because the first commandment is about not having other gods. And an idol is having another god. So if you understand what is being prohibited in the prohibition against graven images, it is an extension of or a part of, you shall have no gods before me.
So when it comes to all of the statues, this will be the other argument is, so we've covered the graven image part, and that'll be okay. But when we have all of the saints, let's say, and how do I argue or how do I defend the fact that the Catholic Church has all these saints that they pray to?
Yeah, great question. So it depends what we mean by prayer. Because if prayer is worship, which is what many Protestants understand it to be, then it would be wrong to do that. But biblically, prayer and worship are related, but they're not the same thing. So to give just an example, where could you pray at the time of Christ? Well, the answer was anywhere. You could go in your room to pray. You could go, the Pharisees liked to go to the street corners in the synagogue to pray so that it could be seen by others. You could pray wherever you wanted to. Jesus would go to a lonely place. Everyone could pray wherever they wanted to. They knew this. What you couldn't do was offer worship in the strict sense of worship, because worship is a sacrificial offering. That's at the kind of the heart of worship. And so in John 4, when Jesus and the Samaritan woman are talking, one of the things she points out correctly is that the Samaritans worshipped on Mount Gerizim and the Jews worshipped at the temple in Jerusalem. But that didn't mean that was the only place they prayed. So I mentioned this to say one of the reasons people sometimes think Catholics worship saints is because they don't know biblically the difference between prayer and worship. But prayer is conversation. It's asking for things. Like pray tell. I want you to tell me something. I'm asking you to tell me. That's literally a prayer. And that's not, I'm not worshiping you when I do that. And so if we ask the saints to ask for things for us, that's not worship. That is prayer. It is conversation with them, but it's not worship. And so should Christians have that kind of conversation with other Christians where they ask for their prayers? They should. In fact, we're told to make supplications for one another. And we're told to go to one another when we need prayers. And we see St. Paul doing this. And we see, there's this long history of Christians praying for one another as part of the body of Christ. So I would just say this. Number one, should the members of the body of Christ pray for each other and ask for prayers from one another? Yes. Number two, is the body of Christ on earth only, or is it also in heaven? Well, it's also in heaven. Number three, so is it okay to ask other members of the body of Christ that are in heaven to pray for us? Seemingly, yes. And in fact, if we take the Bible seriously that the prayer of a righteous man is efficacious, people who are in right relation with God will have their prayers heard in a way that those mired in sin won't. So one of the great things about the saints is you're not worried that they're secretly mired in sin. You're not worried that they're, far from God. They'll actually pray for you where, your Christian neighbor on earth may or may not. So go to your neighbor on earth. I'm not saying don't, but it makes sense to go to your Christian neighbor who's in heaven as well.
I'll tell you what, Mark, I'd love to send you a book. And thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. Very,
Yes.
very helpful and enlightening. And even when you try to be mean, I got to say, you're not a very mean person, Mark.
No.
So if you'd like the book, we have a book called The Saints Pray for You, which is about the very question that you just asked. If you would like it, all you have to do is stay on the line and give us an address, and we'll send it to you there, right in the buckle of the Bible belt. And maybe we'll talk again. And God bless you, and thank you so much. All right, heading the other side of the country, or to the north from the south, we'll go to Minnesota. Stephen, thank you for waiting, Stephen. Why aren't you Catholic?
Well, okay. Can you hear me all right?
Very well.
Sure can.
Okay. So I'm Catholic, but I'm on behalf of one of my brothers who is not Catholic. He's atheist.
Gotcha.
And I have this. He's very smart, right? And he always has this one argument that I just cannot combat. I am not sure how to, go about talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what he says is if God is omniscient, omnipotent, like he knows all things, he's all powerful, he knows the past, present, and future, right?
Yep.
That means he knows what's going to happen. Like he knows it's going to happen. By definition, he says that the universe would be deterministic, right? So then we would have no free will.
Yeah, that is a common objection. It doesn't logically follow at all. Knowing what's going to happen doesn't mean that the person is going to do something doesn't freely do it. Like,
Okay.
The fact you might know,
There you go. Yeah.
like if I leave a Diet Coke out in Sai's office, he's going to drink it. That doesn't mean Sai doesn't have free will. It might mean I know how Sai is going to use his free will.
Okay. So, okay. So then
Think about it like
come
this.
back saying something like, okay, yeah.
If you watch, let's say you record a sports game, and then you watch it the next day, but you already saw the score, so you know how it's going to turn out. Did the players still have free will?
This is true. Okay. I see what you're saying there. But
Okay.
he would probably come back saying like, okay, yeah, like, sure, they feel like they have free will in this, right? But like, again, like say I watch a movie, right? And the
Yep.
person, like, he does their thing, he does what they do, then I watch it again. Like, I know that they are going to do this. They can't do something different, than what they are already going to do. So
Yeah,
like,
this is where the recording kind of lags as an example, but that's not because they don't have free will. It's because they're literally not alive when you're watching it again. Like, you can watch an old-timey movie from 100 years ago. And so the issue isn't that they're like being forced against their will to do the show over again. It's that you're watching something that has already happened. So they're not free to do something different because it's in the past, but they were free when they did it to do the thing that they did.
Okay.
So even in that case, it's not really deterministic. It's just a case of the past is the past. Like, if you read a book about a past battle, you might know how the battle turns out, but that doesn't mean that you're reading the book forces, the Spartans to behave as they did or whatever.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Starting to come together.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of how I would go about making the argument for him in a way that, he'd be able to.
Yeah. An example I like to use from Greek mythology is Cassandra. So Cassandra was a doomed prophetess who knew the future, but no one listened to her. So she would try to warn them, and everyone just disregarded her warnings, and then they would do the things that caused the problem she was warning about. Now, her knowing what was going to happen didn't limit their free will at all. Like, had they just listened, it's not a true story, obviously, but it shows that it isn't like she's forcing this event to happen. She doesn't want the event to happen. Knowing about it doesn't force its occurrence. This is a common kind of misconception. And in the case of the way God knows things, it's maybe worth pointing out that it's not really that God knows the future in a foreknowledge sort of sense like we would imagine, or like would be true of, Cassandra and the mythological example. It's rather that God is outside of time. And so past, present, and future are all simultaneously present to him. So the whole notion of a before and after in terms of prediction, etc., is not real in the full sense. God is sort of standing back from temporality in a certain way and can see the whole thing. But each of the individual parts, it can still be free within that, just because he can see how all of the parts fit together along all the centuries and everything else, doesn't mean that they're not still free parts. It can seem that way to us at a sort of intuitive level, but the minute you try to explain like why it would be deterministic, I think it does fall apart, because there's too many counterexamples of us knowing something's going to happen and it doesn't control the outcome. You're on a mountain and you see two cars going down the road and they're going around a big curve. They don't see each other. They're going to crash into each other. Your knowledge isn't forcing that to happen. Those cars could move out of the way, but from watching it that they're not going to. That's foreknowledge, but it's not a deterministic sort of foreknowledge in the sense that you're somehow forcing it to happen.
I like that example. I think I could work with that.
Stephen, I want to give you a lot more to work with. We have a book by our colleague Trent Horn called Answering Atheism, and probably give you some more things to consider in these conversations with your brother. If you'd like it, just hang on the line. I have to take a break. Right back with more Why Aren't You Catholic? With Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live.
Hang on. We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Proclaiming the faith, changing lives.
The year was 1985.
EWTN is carried on more than 220 cable systems and can be seen in nearly 2 million homes, making it the fastest growing cable network in the country.
To learn more about Mother Angelica's life and the history of EWTN, visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica.
Why aren't you Catholic? That's the question we're asking, and lots of folks have been kind enough to call and tell us why they are not Catholic. Joe Heschmeyer is our guest. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. And if you're not Catholic and you want to get in on the conversation, we would love it if you'd call us, 888-318-7884. Going now to Peoria, Illinois, where Benjamin is listening. Benjamin, thank you. Oh, hello, Benjamin. You're not alone.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just want to do a quick shout out, if I may. Kind of, long story short, fell away from the faith when I was younger. Came back a couple of years ago, and your program has been really great in helping me grow.
So wonderful!
Wanted to give you that shout out. But I'm still not Catholic, so you guys need to do a better job. Apparently.
All right. Thank you for the progress report. We'll do better.
Okay. So my question is, I have an issue with the authority of the Pope.
Okay.
Couple issues. There's sorry, I need to let my brain catch up or slow it down.
Okay. We're all right. Go ahead.
So I like history, so I look at history a lot, and I don't see the line going from Peter to the Bishop of Rome. So that's a question. And then also with the popes going between France and Italy and multiple popes, and it's just like, it seems like there's too many problems there for me. So it's like,
okay, yeah,
I don't see how that authority can be held on to as what the Catholics tend to hold on to.
All right, here's the deal. I wish Joe had written a book about this. Then he could really be of help to you, Benjamin.
So, Benjamin, I've written a book called Pope Peter, and if you stay on the line afterwards, I'll have them give you a copy of it. It'll give more of an in-depth answer than I can probably afford to give here. But let's start with a couple foundational pieces. Is it fair to say biblically that Jesus chooses a top-down structure of leadership for his church?
Oh, I didn't know you were going back to Benjamin. Sorry.
Sorry. I'm going to ask him a
few
questions.
questions. Go ahead, Benjamin.
Yes, but he puts Christ as the head of the church, not the bishop in Rome.
Yeah, absolutely. Christ is the ultimate foundation of the church. We would not want to follow someone who thought he could replace Christ. But in the same way that, if you said, like, who is the head of your family, one answer is going to be you. One answer is going to be God the Father, right?
Right.
But hopefully you don't confuse in what sense you're the head and in what sense God's the head. But like St. Paul can say, for this reason I bow the knee before the Pater, from whom every patria in heaven on earth is named. Like, every fatherhood comes from the fatherhood of God. Well, similarly, right. Peter being the rock comes from Christ being the rock. It's not a rival rock. So you'll find the same kind of language. And you can go back even to the Old Testament. Abraham is described as a rock, but that doesn't replace the fact that God is the rock of Israel. It's not an either or in that sense. But there is rock language used to describe Peter. In fact, his name is changed from Simon to Peter, and Peter means rock. In Aramaic, it's just very simply like, you are rock, and upon this rock I'll build my church. So but really, before I even get to that, I just mean to establish there is top-down leadership first. And second, Peter seems to have this very special authority within it. So Christian leadership is servant leadership. Jesus tells the apostles this. When they're fighting at the Last Supper about which of them is the greatest, he gives himself as the example and says, behold, I'm among you as one who serves. But then he does affirm that the 12 are called to be the servant leaders of the church. That they are, he says, I have prepared 12 thrones for you. He says, as my Father appointed a kingdom for me, so do I appoint for you. You may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what I mean by the top-down, kind of monarchical leadership of the church. It looks like a kingdom. It doesn't look like a democracy. Very next verse, he singles out one disciple, Simon Peter, and says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, but that's you all, that he might sift you all like wheat. Then he switches from the plural to the singular and says, but I've prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brethren. So all the 12 are to be servant leaders of the church. One of the 12, Simon Peter, is to be the servant of the servants of God. This is the basic structure of the church. And you can go back and look at the structure of the family. You can look at the structure of Adam and Eve, of the patriarchs, of the prophets, of the priests, of the kings of Israel. And the idea that there's always one person with whom the buck stops is this recurring theme in the plan of God in salvation history. So then the question just becomes, does that suddenly change after the time of Christ for some reason? And the answer is no. You asked about two specific historical events. One, how do we know this authority continues on from Peter? And we know this in several different ways. You can find references to this. For instance, when St. Ignatius talks about the Church of Rome presiding in charity and his letter to them in the year 107. You can find in the year 96, Clement of Rome writing to resolve a controversy in Corinth, even while an apostle is alive. They've written to the Romans. But maybe the clearest example is Irenaeus in about the year 180. When he talks about the necessity, he says, of the Church of Rome, he calls it the very great, the very ancient and universally known church, founded and organized at Rome by the two most glorious apostles, Peter and Paul. And he says it is a matter of necessity that every church should agree with this church on account of its preeminent authority. And then in the next paragraph, he traces one by one every bishop of Rome from the time of Peter and Paul to the time of Eleutherius in 180. And so we don't just know that the authority passes from Peter to the successors. We can tell you who they are by name. And we can tell you not because of some like late medieval legend or something, but from Christians in the 100s who grew up knowing people who were discipled by the apostles like Polycarp. So that's the first part. Like, do we have clear historical evidence of this authority passing along through the successors in Rome? We do. The second is, as you rightly point out, there are these controversies in the 15th century. So to make a long story medium, the Pope is elected Pope, but there are cardinals who voted for him who claim that, oh, well, we didn't feel free to elect the Pope. And so they say that the papal election was invalid, and they try to hold another election. They don't have the authority to do this because there already is a Pope. You can have a papal conclave when the Pope is dead. You can't just have a new papal conclave when you don't like who the Pope is. And so this new anti-Pope starts claiming to be the Pope, and he's not. And then another group of cardinals gets together in Italy in Pisa and says, well, we're going to reject both these guys and get a new Pope so that it's all clean. And this, of course, doesn't solve the problem. It makes it worse because now you have the real Pope in Rome. You got a fake Pope in France, and you've got a fake Pope in Pisa. This was a confusing, messy situation. It embarrassed the church. It undermined the church's authority in a lot of ways. But it doesn't invalidate the existence of the papacy. Like, you can have counterfeit money, and it doesn't mean money's not real. You can have two different people who claim they're married to the same woman, and it doesn't mean she doesn't have a husband. Like, there might just be times where there's a question about the validity of one marriage, you know? So you should an annulment be granted? There might be times where two different people claim to have won a presidential election, but that doesn't mean that the answer is that there's no president. So it was a bad moment in terms of the legacy of the church, but there was always a pope throughout that.
Benjamin, you can hear the music, so we got to leave it there. I'm going to send you Pope Peter, Joe's book, if you'd like it. And because you're in Peoria, Illinois, the hometown of our own Luke Bender, who runs our YouTube, we'll send you another of Joe's books. How about The Eucharist is Really Jesus? Both of those books coming your way for the cost of your address. Just tell it to Edgar, he'll get the address and we'll send it out. We're going to continue next hour with Why Aren't You Catholic? There's one line open. Maybe there'll be two. 888-318-7884. Joe Heschmeyer, our guest. Welcome back. Another hour of Why Aren't You Catholic? And just one line open. That means we've got lots of non-Catholic folks that have been willing to call, and we do appreciate that. 888-318-7884 is the number. Joe is a wonderful apologist here at Catholic Answers. I'll just read some of the books that he's written. The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, Pope Peter defending the Church's most distinctive doctrine in a time of crisis, The Eucharist is Really Jesus, How Christ's Body and Blood Are the Key to Everything We Believe. That's just three of them. That's just three of his many, many books. And he also is the podcaster behind Shameless Popery. And you can find Shameless Popery the way he described it before. It seems like you can barely miss it. Just step outside. You'll probably be in it. He said you can go to anywhere where you get your podcast. You can go to YouTube and look up Shameless Popery or Joe Heschmeyer. You can go to Spotify. Is there anywhere where it doesn't exist?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were like in a local Amish market or something, you wouldn't be able to get it very easily.
Oh, that's probably true. Yeah.
I mean, they use technology for certain work-related things, but it might be hard to convince them that was work-related.
Yeah, a Catholic apologist? Yeah, that might be hard to convince the Amish to give up
yeah, maybe.
All right. 888-318-7884 is the question. And Arch is all the way over in Hawaii. And so I want to get to Arch. I'm not going to take any more time. Arch, welcome. Wait, what are you supposed I meant to say, Arch, aloha. Why aren't you Catholic?
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys hear me?
Very well, yes.
We can.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not Catholic because I'm Hindu. And so I've been reading a lot recently. I've gone through the Bible in a year with Father Mike Schmitz. And I started the Catechism in a year. And there's a lot that I think that corresponds with the teachings of Hinduism, and particularly I'm in the ISKCON sect of Hinduism. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on reincarnation and what is the Christian or Catholic refutation on reincarnation, and because I know Christians believe that we are both body and soul, whereas in our tradition we're not the body. And so I just want to see how you guys view that, and particularly reincarnation.
Well, let's do that, and then we'll come back to you and see what you think of the answer. Joe?
I've got a couple questions. ISKCON, this is a group someone's called the Hare Krishnas, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Like Krishna consciousness is the Sakhan, I assume, in ISKCON.
Yes.
With reincarnation, how do you harmonize that? Well, okay, let me step back even a little further. Within the cycle of reincarnation, I know that includes humans and at least some animals. How low in the kind of evolutionary org chart does that go? Does that include single-celled organisms? Is there a chance you would die and come back as an amoeba?
Yes. So in our tradition, that everything that has life has a soul, basically. And there is a chance that if you die, you can become an amoeba or a bacteria.
So it seems like for this to work, you would need a fixed number of living things throughout all time. Is that fair to say?
Right.
But it also seems like we know that the number of living things has grown from 0 to a few to a bunch. That's true whether you look at human history or the history of animals or the history of organic life on Earth. So how do you harmonize that with a view of reincarnation?
Yeah, so I have to say I'm not particularly a scholar in my faith, but what I do know is that there is this idea that there are always souls that are falling from the heavenly planets or the spiritual world, and so they're entering the material world and thus populating the world that we live in.
Okay. And so they go from a a pre-existent spiritual realm to becoming material, and then is the goal eventually to like escape that and reach nirvana in that way?
Exactly. And so one thing that we actually are quite similar on, as opposed to like the Buddhists and other people who believe in reincarnation, is that we believe that there is a God above all other gods, and the purpose of life is to develop a personal relationship, a loving personal relationship with him, and to be reunited with him in heaven, so to speak. And
so what?
Whereas,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What would be like good evidence you would see for that? Because I assume like we don't have any conscious experience or memory of having lived some other existence. And a lot of the beings that we're even talking about, I don't know what it would mean to say that this human used to be an amoeba. And, because an amoeba doesn't have any of the elements of a human soul. And so, this thing used to kind of move around and then it died. Okay, there's a certain sense we could talk about it having a material form, and we can call that a soul, but we don't really mean the same thing by that word as we do when we talk about a human being having a soul with like an intellect and will. So what would it mean to even say that you used to be an amoeba or an animal or whatever else?
Yeah, so it would mean that you are, because we believe that the soul is less of like our qualities as a human, and it's the spark of life. So like that spark is the soul, and everything else is either your, physical material body or something like your mind, which would be considered part of your subtle body.
Okay, that's a good point. I'd forgotten about the subtle body. That does make for a different metaphysic. Yeah, because it seems like the spark of life thing, we want to affirm that there is something like that. Like even the word anima in Latin, which is the word for soul, is like the animating principle. So if you were to take like Peter Kraft gives the example of like two identical cows, one of them dies. The difference between them isn't at the physical level, at least not right away. They might have the same number of cells, they might have the same identical looking organs, but one of them has this spark of life within it and one doesn't. That there is, in the case of one, an animating principle of the body, and in the case of the other, that animating principle no longer exists, and so the body decomposes. And so that part, I think we would find some common ground. I think the difficulty is, in the case of an animal, and even more so with like a lower life form, these are not subsistent souls. These are not souls that can exist apart from the body. And so to talk about that spark of life going into another thing would be like saying, well, this one thing I have has an on switch and then it gets destroyed, but this other thing I have also has an on switch. And I think in some way those on switches are spiritually connected to each other. And it's just not clear what that kind of claim would even mean. Because if they're not physically one turned into the other, what kind of spiritual quality that's bringing in is a little amorphous. So I think we would just say we don't see any evidence that subhuman life forms have immaterial souls, and that therefore cross-species reincarnation would be precluded for that reason. At the level of reason, the number of living beings, the number of humans or the number of all species, whatever, would have to be fixed. And all evidence seems to point to the fact that it's instead going up. And we don't have any conscious experience like memory of past lives that would put any weight on the other side of the ledger just to support maybe that being the idea. That rather, everything seems to point to the fact that we didn't exist before we were conceived, and that when we die, there is a certain permanence to death, while at the same time we would believe death doesn't have the final word. There is a finality to death, that the decisions we make in this life are permanent, for better or for worse. So you're not going to have a situation where you live a holy life and then die and then have to do it over again. But you're also not going to have a situation where you live an unholy life, reject God, die, and then, get another bite at the apple. So whether that's good or bad news, I think depends on the kind of life one leads. But we would argue that, I think, both from reason, but also pretty clearly, Scripture teaches that it is apportioned unto all men to die once, after which comes the judgment, that there is a clear biblical denial of anything like reincarnation in favor of what's called the specific judgment upon death.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there are a lot of things in my own faith that I have a hard time reconciling, like the things that you mentioned. And in a certain sense, it comes down to something like, what is the definition of a soul? Because even in our faith, when we die, we forget everything, and then we get put into a new body. And so, but that would be a completely different person or living being.
Right. Like what it means to even call that you, if you have no connection bodily or psychically or psychologically, like how is that still you is one of the questions that I've grappled with in trying to understand it. I had some exposure to ISKCON and the Bhagavad Gita when I was in my teens and early 20s, and I found some good impetus to delve more deeply in these questions. The Bhagavad Gita is beautiful, but at the same time, I think the message that it has is deterministic in this way that, as a Christian, as much as I've appreciated kind of what it did for me, if I'm being honest, I'm grateful that the Christian message seems to me much more optimistic and hopeful than I get from any of the early Hindu texts.
Right. I guess my last question would be, in short, what would your definition of the soul be from a Christian point of view?
So, okay. You're asking a philosophy nerd to do a short answer to a question that could go much longer, but it's at the very broadest level, it's the immaterial principle of life for material things. So that's for all things. And in the case of a human, because we have a rational soul, it is also the seat of the intellect and the will. It is that part of us that isn't reducible to the body, and that part of us that can survive even when the body is destroyed. That there are parts of you that are just they're so tied up in your body, you can't even imagine, what does it mean to, stub your toe without a foot? It doesn't seem like it means anything. But there are other things where to remember, to contemplate, to pray, those things don't appear to be reducible to the body, that we have evidence that there's more to ourselves than just our bodies. And the term for that spiritual center is the soul.
I tell you what, I want to keep talking about the soul and Hinduism and Catholicism and all of it, but I have to take a break. There is a limit set on these things. So Arch, I'd love to send you one of our books. Joe, do you want to recommend a book that you think we should send to Arch? Is there one that strikes you as that would be a good one to send?
A lot of Arch. I get the feeling like you're very open to kind of exploring the spiritual riches of what the Catholic Church has to offer. And I wonder if I'm blanking. What is the book we just came out with? It's kind of a spiritual handbook for Catholic apologetics. What is that? Am I ringing a bell here?
With me, you're not. Somebody tell me, because
okay.
It's not ringing a bell.
Maybe we can just send Why We're Catholic. It's a tried and true, and it won't leave me trying to remember a book title.
And I'll look up that other book.
And then Arch,
go ahead.
Please feel free to call back and continue this conversation. We were a delight to talk to.
The Soul of Apologetics. So
Soul
send
of
both
Apologetics.
of those. Send them both, of course. The Soul of Apologetics. Okay, we'll send you both of those, Arch, if you'd like them. Why We're Catholic and the Soul of Apologetics. It's actually it's lovely that you called and talked about your Hindu faith, because I must admit, and it probably has to do with the demographics of the United States, we don't get as many calls from Hindus as we would like to get. From time to time we do, but we'd love to get more. So, if you're Hindu and you didn't call today, Arch is just better than you. That's what I'm saying. 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live. Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
Why do we need to pray? Well, the Catholic faith is all about communion with God. And prayer is the form that our communion with God takes. If we're not praying, we're not in communion with God. But we can get in communion with God really quickly by prayer. It's the easiest, quickest, and only route to connect to our Creator. And that's what we're made for. That's why we need to pray.
No, you got a cat? Is this a joke?
No.
All right.
People on YouTube.
Welcome back,
to see Leo.
Catholic Answers Live. Joe Heschmeyer, our guest, just said the most astonishing thing right before we went back on the air. You can't say those things to me, and now I'm dying of curiosity. You got a what?
Yeah, we got a cat. So the backstory went like this. My wife and my kids wanted a cat, and I said, we can't have pets. I travel. I don't need one more thing. We've got 3 small kids. A cat would be a terrible idea. And our friends said, you guys need a cat. And they sold us their house, and they said, one of the conditions of the house is you need a kitten. And I was like, yeah, right, we're not getting a cat. And then last week, I went back to the house for something, and I see our friend drive up, and she and her friends get out of the house with a kitten and a bunch of stuff and say, we brought your new cat.
So you got a cat.
Yeah, if I'm being 100% honest, it's an adorable kitten. And I took to Patreon, which, by the way, is shamelessjoe.com. And I asked people on Patreon and I asked people on YouTube what we should name it, and got a gazillion punny answers, like Seamus Potpourri.
Oh, Purry, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Seamus is a name. It works on a lot of levels. But we narrowed it down to like 4, and then we couldn't decide on those 4 names, and then we put it to a vote, and thousands of people voted.
Oh, nice.
And the name Leo won, and so we named him Leo on the Feast of St. Leo on Monday, and, also in honor of both St. Leo and Pope Leo, and the fact that Leo means lion, so it's funny because he's a cat.
Yeah, that is funny, and it's good. So you got a little cat, Leo the first.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Hopefully Leo the only, just for the record, but I like him so far.
Well, I'm glad that you like him, Joe. I have a little ambivalence about cats, but I think it's because I've been deathly allergic to them since. Not deathly. I'm not going to die if I'm around a cat. I shouldn't have said it that way, but I'm miserable around a cat, so I never really got to enjoy a cat very much. And now they have these hypoallergenic cats. They like bred them so that they don't. I'm just not sure that's good for the cat. I mean, I like, what did they do to that cat? Did they irradiate it? So I have very mixed feelings about cats, but I'm glad you got Leo.
Trying not to get toxoplasticity, whatever it's called.
I don't know what that is.
There's like a brain disease you can get from cats.
Oh, you seem like you have it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Toxoplasmosis. There it is.
Oh, toxoplasmosis. It's like a cat-based brain disease.
It's a cat-borne thing. Yeah, it's most cats are asymptomatic.
Oh, all right. I have a note from Carrie here. Radio promo for Rhine Cruise. We want you to come on the Rhine with us. Joe Heschmeyer, Chris Check, and I. We sometimes do this thing called the Flannel Panel, and Flannel Panel is going to cruise the Rhine from Amsterdam to Basel, and it's going to be wonderful. We're going to visit with Hildegard of Bingen and Charlemagne and the 3 kings, and none of whom are alive, but we are going to visit. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, they're just no longer with us here on this planet, but we're going to visit with them, and we're going to talk about them, and we're going to have a great time going to the heart of where Christianity came in came to the Germanic people, And that's one of the great successes of Christianity on this earth. And so we're just a lot of wonderful stuff to see, and we'd love it if you'd come. You just go to CA Radio 2020. No, you don't. That's not, I said that wrong. You go to CatholicCruise.com and you use the promo code CA Radio 2026. Could we get a longer promo code? We're only going to have savants on this trip with us. Anybody like me is not going to remember that. All right, go to CatholicCruise.com, and if you use the promo code CA Radio 2026, you get $300 off per person. And if you go there and they don't have the cabin you want, because I have to be honest with you, some of the lower cost cabins, they go first. But if we don't have the cabin you want, you call us. We're going to find a way to get you on there. We'll find a way to get you on this because we want to make sure this thing is full. We're getting close to being full, but we want it to be full. CA Radio 2026. Use that as the promo code when you go to CatholicCruise.com. Right now, we are talking with...
real quick question. Do they have geese along the Rhine?
Oh, this is okay. Let me just tell anybody who's a new listener, what's about to follow is a joke that's going to make you groan. Okay, prepare to groan.
You're not wrong. I wanted to make sure they
I know
them.
when the groan-inducing jokes are coming. Si, do they have geese along the Rhine? Why, I don't know, Joe. Do they have geese?
I don't either, but I'm hoping to see a male one so that I can point while we're on the boat and say, "Look, Ryan Gosling."
The show's over. Just go home, everybody. I don't even. If you're driving, I'd say get off, turn around, go back to wherever you came. There's just no point. Why go on? Why go on after a joke like that?
A joke that causes an existential crisis.
You need to all go home and read Camus. That's what you need to do now because life has just become
literally
meaningless.
the worst advice you've gotten.
I'm only kidding. Don't read Camus. By the way, they should have a whale at SeaWorld named Camus. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318 to go with Shamu.
I was thinking like the French SeaWorld. That'd be a nice one.
Giovanni in Houston, Texas. Giovanni, we're so glad you're here, but why aren't you Catholic?
Yeah, so pretty much, I'm going to try to condense these into, I have 4 questions, but I'm going to try to condense them into just 2 questions.
Okay.
Actually, I did think about being Catholic. I used to watch Joe Heschmeyer a lot, and he was actually one of the driving forces for me to become Catholic. I personally don't have a problem with the papacy, personally. However, the problem that I have actually stems from the Pope, which is one of my first issues. One is if the Pope is going to be the focal point and the face of Catholics, then he needs to... Right now, I feel like in that parable about building your house on rock, on solid rock, and you have the one that built on sand. I feel like the Pope is built on sand right now because if you're going to be the focal point of Catholics, but you're allowing same-sex attraction, acceptance and inclusion, transgender inclusion, and even though you're not exactly affirming marriage when it comes to that, but you're accepting it, making it seem as though that's okay. And then when you try to correct individuals when it comes to things like that, I feel like it becomes a contradiction. Because even in Romans 1, chapter 18 to 31, God gave them over to their depravity, to their sins. And to include to that, he also said that we need to synergize, which is the other question, which I'm just going to throw in there as well.
Okay.
That we have to be respectful to other religions. But you have other religions like people that believe in the Quran who say that they deny Jesus is the Son of God. They deny that he's God. You got the Jews who deny Jesus at all. So if you're gonna say we have to be respectful to religions that disrespect the God that we say is God, how can I put my faith in you as a pope to lead us in the direction to be the focal point of Catholics when you contradict what God says? Because even John the Baptist condemned people when they disrespected the words of God. But yet Pope Leo, even the Pope prior to him, there's pictures of him kissing the Quran. And that's where my contradictions kind of came in at, to where I'm just like, I can't be part of a faith that contradicts what the Bible is teaching.
Okay, yeah, I think you did a very good job of presenting that. I don't know the exact quote you have in mind about needing to be respectful to other religions from Pope Leo. So I will try to answer in a general way, but there may be a specific line that he said that troubled you that I haven't heard. But he has talked about some of the common things that we can find that other religions as well, we can have. Oh, yeah, okay, here we go. He said, our world needs our unity, our friendship, and our collaboration. That as Christians, we can find ways to work with people who aren't Christian, who still believe in something, in a world that's often very secular and atheist. And I think I would agree with that, without believing that this makes those other religions equally true or valid or anything like that. Somebody trying to understand the nature of the universe, someone trying to have a relationship with God, we can have a kind of meaningful conversation in a way where somebody who doesn't care about that stuff isn't even ready for that. If you will, I will answer kind of in more depth, Giovanni, after this break. We can't.
Please do hold on, Giovanni. We want to take a good long time to talk with you after this. Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
What was the church like in its infancy? In a word, Catholic. And Joe Heschmeyer has the receipts. In his best-selling book, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church, he gives you the details from the historical records of the first 2 centuries of Christianity. Right now, get a copy for just $10, plus free shipping if you live in the continental United States. Get more information and order The Early Church Was the Catholic Church at theearlychurchwascatholic.com.
What is the Catholic Church? Everyone seems to have an opinion, but the church never quite fits into the boxes people make for it. In The Faith Unboxed, author Andrew Petiprin looks at some of the most common boxes people put the Catholic Church in and explains why they don't fit. In doing so, he brings us closer to what the church really is, the institution founded by Christ. Order The Faith Unboxed today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We asked, why aren't you Catholic? And quite a few people have been generous enough to call. If you want to call, let me look at the lines. Well, we probably could get 1 or 2 more calls on the air with Joe before the top of the hour. So if you're not a Catholic and you would like to get in on the conversation, we've had all kinds of calls from all kinds of angles of why a person is not Catholic. And it's just been great for us. We are Catholic. We don't hide that. We're trying to help other people to come into the Catholic Church. We don't hide that, but we think conversation is the way to do that. And if you want to have that conversation with us, 888-318-7884. Giovanni in Houston, Texas, actually is open, or has in the past been open to the Catholic faith, but does not find the church to be much of a rock, if I'm expressing that correctly, for 2 reasons, as far as I can understand it. One of them having to do with compromising with the sexual mores of the world, the worldly sexual mores that we see around all of us, not being firm enough in standing up to that. And the other one, I think you did number 2 first, right, Joe? Did you take number 2 first?
So
go ahead.
Because I think there's something of a logical flow in my mind to how I think this should go. Because there has been a push from the time of the Second Vatican Council onward to say, what good can we find in other people's belief systems, even when those belief systems are wrong? And you could focus on where are they wrong, what do they get wrong? And I think there's a time and place for that. I do that a lot with my show, Shamus Popery. And I'm not knocking that in the slightest. The danger in doing that can be that people come away with an exaggerated sense of how far apart we are. And the other danger is that you can miss some opportunities for collaboration. The flip side is to say, what do we have in common? And that's also a good approach. The danger can be that sometimes you can come away with an exaggerated sense of how close we are. And the distinctives of each tradition or belief system, etc., can be sort of lost in the wash. That seem fair so far, Giovanni?
Yeah, I mean, I want to say yes, but at the same time, like I said, I feel like right now Catholics kind of contradict the Bible, which is why I gave you Romans, because I feel like Romans 1, chapters 18 to 31, kind of it pretty much contradicts when they say that they want to include these individuals. And then even as far as being respectful to other religions, right? So let's bring that. You have James 4, verses 3 to 5, where it says, "You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be friends with the world makes himself an enemy of God." And by trying
so
to say,
do you think that means like
include,
having non-Christian friends?
No, that's not what I mean. Okay, so it's like this, right? So you can have non-Christian friends, but if they're in sin, we're going to correct them on their sin. What the Catholic Church right now as a whole is doing is they're saying we're going to hear out the other religions, be buddies with them, but we're not going to correct their view on how to go to God, even though Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me." So we're not going to try to emphasize that to them. How can I put my faith into the church that if we're going to hold the Pope as we did Saint Peter, right? Because that's the whole point of the piece. Like I said, I don't have a problem with that. However, if the person who's the focal point of the church is not holding true to the Bible and the Word of God and how Peter taught, or even how John the Baptist lived his life when he condemned people, well, how can I bring people of like the faith of Catholic to other people when they allow sin in the church?
Okay, yeah. So I would say both these things are good. Like, you can't just be buddy with sin, but we are called to love sinners. And so, in Luke 15, one of the critiques Jesus has is that he eats with tax collectors and prostitutes, right? That this is one of those things where there's a little bit of a pastoral tightrope to walk, where you want to affirm people and not drive them away, but you don't want to affirm sin. And there is absolutely a time and a place to really call people to the carpet for their sin, individually as well as collectively. That time and place is not always the first thing you say to someone. And so I agree with you that sometimes I think they err on the side of being too buddy, too soft on some things, that church leaders are sometimes not strong enough or as tough as they should be in some of these. But I don't think that actually makes them that different than St. Peter. St. Peter preaches this message of how the plan of salvation includes uncircumcised Gentiles. He does this in Acts 10 and 11. It's reiterated in Acts 15. But in Galatians 2, when he's in Corinth and he's with this group of Jewish Christians, he kind of buckles a little bit. He doesn't teach anything false, but he just doesn't take a very bold stand. He doesn't stand up for the Gentile Christians, and therefore he doesn't stand up in this moment that really could have used it for the truth of the gospel. But that doesn't make him not the Pope. It doesn't mean we throw out Peter as an apostle or anything like that. We just recognize that sometimes even good Christian leaders can fail to live out the kind of pastoral leadership that we want from them. And that's been true literally since the first century. That's been true literally since the 12. And I'm just talking about the good Christian leaders there. Because the Bible is very clear that God will sometimes give us leaders who aren't good leaders. Think about people like Judas. And so you've got good and bad bishops, you've got good and bad popes, you've got good and bad apostles. The truth of Christianity doesn't turn on how good or how bad the practitioners of Christianity are. And that's true whether we're talking about you and me. That's true whether we're talking about the 12. It's true whether we're talking about the Pope. So I'm sympathetic to saying we could use more strong language on the truths about sexual immorality and the distinctiveness of Christianity. Although I think if we're being fair, Pope Leo has said, like for instance, in August 24th, he gave his Angelus about how Christ is the narrow way. And he preaches about that and warns us not to imagine that, religious acts and a sense of self-complacency are going to do the trick. Like, he does say those things. He also says things where he tries to affirm the other things we can rightly affirm. But that's partly just recognizing, as St. Paul does in Acts 17, one of the challenges is, what can we build from in terms of common ground? Not so that people come away thinking all religions are equally valid or everything's equally true, but precisely so that we can have a kind of meaningful conversation and having a starting place to even have, because if we just have like nothing in common at all, it's unlikely anyone's going to be converted by the gospel or come on board. But if we can interact with the beliefs that they already have that are right, and then lead them into the fullness of truth, pastorally, that is often a more productive way of getting people to see the fullness of the gospel. I don't know if that makes sense or not, Giovanni. What do you think?
I mean, in a sense, like I said, in a sense, it makes. So I agree with you on having a starting point when it comes to maybe other religions. Since I guess if they believe in a God, we can have an open discussion as far as that goes. So I guess I agree with you on that. But as far as I would say the direction of the church, if we're going to choose leaders and go with the interpretation of we have good popes and we have bad popes, then the whole focal point of Catholic religion is papacy. And like I said, I personally don't have an issue with it as long as the Pope is standing on what Jesus and the apostles were teaching. And we can sit here and say they should take a more firm stance. However, that's not something that needs to be said to a Pope. That's supposed to be the overall view that has guidance by God. If you're me, like you said, me and you, even yourself, right? You say, the approach could be stronger. However, the fact that me and you can say that, but the Pope isn't doing that and is allowing, like I said, transgenderism, he's affirming that because he's not condemning it. He can still bring it up, but yet the Catholic Church is affirming these actions.
Well, I don't think I agree with that way of thinking about morality. I mean, he has been Pope for under a year. So is the idea that of all the sins in the world, everything he doesn't personally call out by name, he's okay with?
As far as what?
Well, I think about all the different sins, all the different things he could have spoken on. It seems like your argument is, unless he specifically denounces it, he must be okay with it. I don't think that's a fair standard to hold anyone to. I don't even think you would want to hold... I've heard people argue that... Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I've heard people say, oh, Jesus doesn't explicitly condemn homosexuality, therefore he must have been okay with it. And I don't find that line of argumentation persuasive at all. And so I don't think it would be enough to say we don't have enough words specifically condemning these particular sins from the Pope, therefore he's condoning it. Is there something he's said that makes you think he's okay with transgenderism or agrees with it or something?
No, so I'm not saying that he himself said anything. However, what I am saying is that even with the last Pope that we had, of, like I said, him kissing the Quran, there's pictures of him doing that, and yet the Quran denies the godhood of Jesus. and I'm not saying that Pope Leo does that, but even then,
No, right.
what I'm saying is that if you're going to take a stance, if you're going to take the position, and yes, I'm granting him the chance of him being there for a year, but the fact of the matter is that no conversation, he hasn't openly either as well, haven't said, because the only issues I normally see with Catholic, like I said, that's those first two was them saying that we need to be open and try to be respectful to other religions that disrespect, who Jesus is, and then just allowing things that are outside of the Bible into the church and not directly bringing it up into conversation like, okay, you know what, we're going to bring these people in, but we're bringing these individuals in to help them seek God. However, that's not even a focal point in conversation. It's just we're going to bring them in. They even said that they even bless same sex. They don't affirm the marriage, but they say that they're doing blessing for same sex. They're allowing them to be witnesses to baptism. And I'm like, I don't know if that's biblical. I might be off on that, but like I said, I watched a lot of your videos, so most of the information that I got from your YouTube channel, because you were, like I said, you were a focal point to me deciding whether I wanted to go Catholic or not.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't clear on some of that then. I do think, in terms of just like on the transgender thing or anything like that, if you look up Pope Francis, gender ideology, he had a much longer time of being Pope and had more opportunities so far to speak out on that. And I think he has many really very strong things to say on this. He was very gentle with individuals who were, suffering with gender dysphoria and everything. But he was very clear that he thought gender ideology was one of the biggest dangers of our time. Those two things are compatible. And I would view the papacy, whether it's Leo or Francis or Benedict or John Paul, in the same light, that they're trying to love sinners and be strong on hating sin. You might think that they could do a better or worse job on that. I don't think the truth of the papacy comes down to how well you would grade them on that. Like, the question is ultimately, does this authority come from God or not? If it doesn't, and they're pretending it does, then we shouldn't follow them even if they're really good leaders. If it does come from God, then we should follow them even if they're not always the best leaders. Because, someone in the first century would hopefully not say like, yeah, I don't love that apostle, I don't really like his style, so I'm not going to join his church. That's not how Christianity is meant to work. So I think I understand the concerns you have. I just want to make sure we don't end up asking the wrong question of, do I agree with all of the decisions the Pope makes? I would venture to guess no one in the history of the church has ever said, I agree with every decision every Pope in my lifetime has made. But thanks be to God, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't come down to each of our individual decisions. That's one of the beautiful parts of having a Pope, instead of it all being our own individual judgment. So I would just ask if, focus on that question of, does the authority come from God or not? Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say thank you to Giovanni, and I hope you'll call more, Giovanni. This again, I'm so grateful for the conversation. A wonderful opportunity for conversation with you. If you'd like Joe's book, Pope Peter, I'd be happy to send it to you. You're under no obligation, of course, but just give us an address in Houston. We'll send you that book if you'd like, and call anytime. We'd love to continue to have this conversation. I, however, have to go to a break, and I'm looking ahead at the next two calls, and I really want to make sure I have time to get these two callers on with Joe. So if you're on the line, just hang on. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be right back and get you on with Joe Heschmeyer on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Hi, this is Brother John Bosco Mills. In our world, there are so many words and so many images, and they all have different messages, and they're giving us different messages. We need Catholic radio because we need to hear the voice of truth. And the voice of truth is the one that tells us about Jesus and his church. And the Catholic radio gives us that truth.
The world needs EWTN Catholic Radio, now more than ever.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Why aren't you Catholic today? Joe Heschmeyer, our guest, Jeremy in Oklahoma on the line. Jeremy, thank you for the call. Why aren't you Catholic?
Hey, so I think that for me, from an agnostic perspective, I've got a question for you, and then that will kind of lead into my reasoning why I'm not Catholic. So from a Catholic perspective, why did God create all of this? Like, why is it even all here?
Out of an abundance of love. So the best analogy I would use is when a couple gets married, they love each other a lot. There's an effusive nature to that love where you want to share that love with others. And so you, in that case, have kids. You know, that's a pretty natural reaction of just like the overflowing nature of love. And so in one sense, why did God make us? To know, love, and serve him in this life and to be happy with him for all eternity. That's, you know, why we're here. Why is all of the cosmos here? Out of the kind of abundant outpouring of the love of God.
So we're all here to know and love and serve God. That's,
yes.
I mean, like really short, right?
That's like Baltimore Catechism, Jeremy. Have you read the Baltimore Catechism? Like, I think you actually quoted it.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Oh, well, yeah, but
No, I haven't at all.
For an agnostic, you're very Catholic.
Okay. Well, more Catholic than I thought, maybe. No. And so, okay. So if that is why we're all here, from a Christian perspective, whether we're talking about Catholics or Protestants, God is all knowing and all present and all powerful, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. That's right.
So if this was the purpose of God, why did he create a world knowing that he would have to send his son to die? Why not just create a world where we could be in, relationship with him and, be, love him and worship him forever? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, we apologists jump through all of these hoops, but like very simply, if God's all powerful, why not just create a world where none of this ever even had to happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's really several questions kind of baked into that. Why does God create man in a condition where he can rebel in the first place? Why, when man rebelled, does God not just say, don't worry about it? Why does he instead insist on like the fittingness of the incarnation and Jesus dying on the cross and all of this, right? So there's several ways of going about answering that question, because it's really a very big question in a good way, but it's a very big question. And I think part of the key to this answer is that we are not just lab rats and we're not just recipients. We are called to be participants in this plan of salvation, and we're called to be made like God. 1 John chapter 3, John says, "Beloved, we are God's children." I'll just quote it. He says, "See what love the Father has given us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now. It does not yet appear what we shall be. We know that when he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is." So the Christian message isn't just sin is a problem, and here's this really complicated legal way of resolving it. It's rather that God creates these creatures, humans, and then embarks on this all of history long journey where he interacts with his creatures and then unites himself with them personally in the person of Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ is both God and man, that by taking on humanity, the story of the history of humanity becomes tied up, as it were, with the story of God, so that we aren't just the problem in the story. We're not just the antagonist. We're also able to be part of the protagonist. Does that make sense? Like, one of the things St. Thomas Aquinas presents is exactly, maybe if not exactly your argument, but at least very similar, of like, well, couldn't God have just said, like, I'm going to wave away the problem of evil. I'm going to wave away the problem of sin. And yet, instead, he has Christ come in and dies this really ghastly death and everything. Why do that? And he offers 5 different reasons. But the one that I find the most beautiful is that he talks about how in this way we are made part of the solution to the problem of sin rather than just part of the problem. Like, as a father, I know how much easier it is when my kids make a mistake to just fix it for them, but I know how much more important it is to take the time to do it with them and let them be part of the solution to a problem that they made. And that in a mysterious way, the incarnation, Jesus shows us that. Like, he cooperates with us and becomes one of us so that we can share in this salvific redemptive act. I don't know if that just sounds like crazy talk to you. Does that make any sense at all?
I mean, honestly, no, it doesn't. I'm sorry. No, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. From my perspective, it's just like, I'm still kind of stuck on, so I feel like what I heard you say was, okay, well, the reason why is because we're created in his image. We're supposed to play a part in this, reality that he's created. And I don't really connect the dots between those things and like why, even if I'm all knowing, all powerful, all present, why even create it the way that it is,
Well, and what specific, like that's too big of a question, maybe. Why create what in the way that, like?
Okay, so yeah, like why create a world where you, as God, I know I'm going to create people, and people are going to fall away from me in this perfect relationship that I create them in. Why do that? Why, when that is going to happen, do I have to go through this whole crazy?
Well, let's take the first half of that first. Let's take the first half of that first, because I think that'll be maybe more productive. What would you have God do instead? Like, just create us already in heaven, or not create us at all?
Let's go back to the point. Like, if the point is to, out of an abundance of love, to share that love with people, why not? Yeah, create people in a way that he could share that love with them forever, without having to do all of this.
Well, I think he does. It's kind of like saying, if you're a wealthy parent, why not just give your kids like a big inheritance rather than having them like share in the family business? Because it's not good for them. We are better served by actually being part of the plan, where we're not simply recipients, but are actually given the dignity of causality.
Yeah, that's hard too, because so the elect then are better served by it, but then those that aren't, go through all of this suffering because those that are going to be better served by having gone through it. Like, how do I reconcile a loving God with a God that would do that?
Yeah, I think with the reality that those who aren't elect, it's not because God didn't want them. God desires all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. That's explicitly taught in 1 Timothy 2. There are versions of Christianity that seem to functionally deny that. But the Bible itself doesn't. The Bible itself is very clear. God desires the salvation of every individual. Christ dies on the cross for every individual. So God, in love for us, wants to strengthen us and prepare us for the glories of heaven, even though he knows some of us will reject those free gifts that he's given us.
If you'd like it, Jeremy, we'd love to send you the book Why We're Catholic by our colleague Trent Horn. I'm sorry I left a call on the line. I really wanted to get to everybody, but it's become very popular, this show of Why Aren't You Catholic? And we enjoy it a great deal, so we'll keep doing it. We'll do more of these to try to give as many non-Catholics as we can a chance to have these conversations with the apologists, and we'll all... I'm sure we will all benefit. At least I hope we will all benefit from that. Joe Heschmeyer, thank you for 2 fine hours.
My pleasure. And thanks everybody who called in. I thought they were great calls today.
ShamelessJoe.com. That's where you can find about Joe. Shameless Joe.